Welcome everybody to Bloomsbury Central Baptist Church. My name is Simon and I'm the minister here. It's an absolute delight to be hosting this event. I'm just going to take a minute or two, not very long, just to tell you a little bit about why it's significant for us that this event is happening in this building as an extension of the values of this community that worships and meets here. This building was built in 1848. And 3 years after it was built, it was the Great Exhibition. And we had visiting Americans, Baptists, coming to London, wanting to come and worship at the new church. And the church took a decision to place an advert in the Times, firstly welcoming them, but secondly saying that if they supported the Fugitive Slave Act, which was part of the legacy of slavery in the United States, then they were not welcome at the Lord's table and they were not welcome in this church. So within 3 years of its founding, it was excommunicating people because of racial oppression. 1961, 100 years later, October, Martin Luther King preaches his first sermon in the UK in this building, stood just behind where I'm stood now. So we've got a real history of this church kind of embodying values of inclusion and justice, both in terms of this country and further afield. We're still hands-on with issues relating to justice. We're part of London Citizens, the community organising networks, and we get involved on issues such as affordable housing, homelessness, youth violence, living wage. Those kinds of issues are very live for us as a congregation. But we're also a church that has a long history of engaging with Palestine. So this time last year, a group of us from the church were in the occupied territories of the West Bank. And it's unbelievable that it was a year ago, but we were visiting Hebron and seeing what a divided city Hebron is. We were wandering through the streets of the Aida refugee camp and hearing some of the stories of what goes on in that camp. My wife wears a little necklace made from metal that has been taken from tear gas canisters that the IDF throw into the refugee camp, and there's a guy there who makes them into jewellery. So it's an absolute privilege that we're going to be hearing some quite emotional stories, and there's no shame in getting emotional about an issue such as this. But know that this is a safe place, it's a welcoming space, and it's good to have you here. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here and joining us. My name is Susannah, and I am the founder and director of Ariadne, which is a collective of women who make theatre, social and political theatre, to inspire change. Iman Aoun of ASHTAR Theatre is one of our members, and she put this call out 2.5 weeks ago, asking that the Gaza Monologues be read wherever they possibly could be. A week ago, that number was 70 events happening around the world. Today, Iman updated me that it is 2,000, that there are 2,000 readings of these monologues happening in over 40 countries all across the world. It is the most extraordinary embrace of solidarity to the people of Palestine at this time. They had hoped to have a letter for us to read by their director, who is in Gaza at the moment, and he hasn't managed to, which I'm sure we can all understand and appreciate. However, he has made a video, so we're going to start with his video, and then our amazing readers are going to read these monologues with some breathing space. Thanks to Ivan Micaela, who's going to be playing a bit of piano, and I will be back at the end. These monologues were written by children who were working with ASHTAR Theatre in Gaza in 2008, and they worked on them and then finally wrote them in 2010. So these are the works that they wrote then. We'll make sure that we put up on like social media and things. There are documentaries of where they are now. We are going to update you on the news that we have of them or not with each monologue. But yeah, they're from 2010, and we'll be saying the age that they were when they were written. So I leave you with the words of Ali Abu Yassin, who is director and trainer at ASHTAR Theatre, a video that he made within the last 48 hours. Thank you.
السيدات والسادة الأعزاء، أرسل لكم تحياتنا من غزة الحزينة والموشحة بالسواد، والتي لا زال شبح الموت يخيم على سمائها. أما بعد، أرجوكم أن تدلوني على طريقة أستطيع بها أن أهرب من كل هذا الموت. أوجدوا لي حيلة أقنع بها أطفالي أن يناموا دون خوف ودون أن لا يستيقظوا مفزوعين يصرخون بجنون في كل ليلة، وكل أغاني الكون وأحضان الأمهات لا تسكت صراخهم، وصوت الزنانة لا يتوقف. فقدت الثقة بكل المفردات التي لا تساوي دمعة أم على ابنها أو صرخة كهل على بيته المدمر الذي أفنى حياته يبني به وكأنه وطنه الصغير. كيف أقنع عيوني التي تعودت أن ترى غزة الجميلة أن تراها الآن؟ غزتي تنزف، نعم غزتي، لأنني شاهدتها وهي تبنى حجرا حجر. كنت أفرح حينما يرصف شارعا أو يبنى مطعما. كل ذلك دمر وقتلونا دون أن يرف لهم جفن. دم بكل مكان. أرجوكم ساعدونا على وقف هذا النزيف الممتد منذ عام 1948 وإلى الآن. بت أشك بقدرة العالم على لجم إسرائيل من استعبادنا وتصميمها أن تعاملنا كعبيد ووحوش لا يستحقون الحياة. ولم لا؟ وهناك الآلاف من قرارات الأمم المتحدة لصالح فلسطين لا زالت بالأدراج، وإسرائيل تضرب بها عرض الحائط. قولوا لي كيف ستساعدوننا من أجل أن ننال حريتنا؟ نحن آخر شعبا في الأرض لا يزال تحت الاحتلال. لقد تعبنا من الشجب والاستنكار وإعادة الكلمات الميتة والممجوجة حول الاحتلال وبشاعته، والموت بنا لا يتوقف. دعونا من الكلمات وهيا بنا إلى الأفعال، فشعبنا دفع الثمن أضعافا مضاعفة، فما دفعناه يحرر كل شعوب الأرض مرات ومرات. نشعر أن القدر أصبح ضدنا. ساعدونا على تغيير أقدارنا. أقسم لكم بأننا بشر مثل باقي شعوب الأرض. لدينا المبدعين والأطباء والشعراء والحالمين والكارهين والعاشقين والنساك والتعساء. نحن كباقي شعوب الأرض. لا تخافوا منا، لا تقتلونا. أوقفوا أحدث آلات القتل والتدمير على أطفالنا ونسائنا وشيوخنا وشبابنا. نحن نستجير بكم، أنقذونا أو اقتلونا. فلا طاقة لدينا بعد الآن لنتحمل المزيد من كل هذا العذاب. شكرا لإصغائكم.
محمد العمراني born 1995 الشجاعية المنطار. غزة the warm arms and the fire of hell. Terror, fear, death, and destruction. But this time, our area was safe. Every time the occupation attacks, they hit us first. But it looks like this time they got bored. They got bored of our area and wanted to make some change. So we got lucky. I used to spend the whole day sitting on a chair watching people running away from their houses towards the borders, carrying their belongings, sons and daughters, and going west of Gaza. Some of them were carrying their kids on their shoulders, their mothers on their backs. Where they were going, you don't know, till all of Gaza got squeezed in one area. Then the distance became tighter. They started to get to our house. I say to my father, "What? Is it our turn now? But where are we going? Where are we going to go?" My dad insisted that we stay at home and said, "A person who leaves his house loses his dignity." I say to myself, "Kid, stay put. You are not better than others, and whatever happens, happens." All day, I would busy myself with food, if there is any. And sometimes we would go to fill water with my cousin from the pipes in the street. It was about 1,000 meters away from my house. We used to take the donkey cart of Sabri. Him and his brother used to come with us to help. All the way, he would tell us about his heroic acts and his horse, and how he would go to the wilderness and hunt birds with a slingshot, and he used to cook them with olive oil. I never carried a slingshot. It's scary, but the stories were nice, and those days entertaining. Despite our fear, we used to talk so as to lessen our fear from being in the streets. When the daytime was over and night came, we would say, "The night has come with its worries." We couldn't even sleep. I used to sleep for 15 minutes and wake up for 3 hours. How can you sleep with the bombing going on? And we are lying in the bed waiting for our fate. Sometimes I would look at the sky from the edge of the window and find the world so red, with fire and smoke everywhere. I would ask myself, why? Why is the whole world at rest and we are living an inferno? Thank you.
Ahmad Taha, 14 years old, born in Al-Daraj, now living in Gaza, owns a shop. We have no news from him. All my life, I thought that Gaza was the biggest and most beautiful city in the world. But once, I went with my dad to Jaffa and came back with my head spinning. After that, I felt that Gaza was the size of a needle hole and wasn't beautiful, and it keeps getting smaller and worse. No one can breathe, and on top of it all, we're not allowed to travel. Every time I walk the streets of Gaza, I suffocate. Jaffa's picture won't leave my mind. I ask myself, where are we? We're so far from the rest of the world. That's why I'm always at the sea, because I feel it's not from Gaza. I keep writing my name on the sand, and the waves come and erase it. Before the war, I wanted to be an electronics engineer, but since the war, I hate going to school. I feel I won't be anything important in my life, and even if I will, so what? It's all the same in this city. Am I going to be the prettiest flower on a garbage heap? When the bombing began, All the schools in Gaza went home, except us. The principal wouldn't let us leave. The kids freaked out, and in a second, they went out into the schoolyard. The weird thing is that I'm from the Zaytunaya school, the one near the Ministry of Passports, which got hit first. With the first hit, a piece of rocket flew onto the biggest tree in the school and sliced it in two, like a sugarcane. As soon as we saw that, no one stayed in school. Students, teachers, or the principal. We fled for our lives. I thought the only martyr that I would see in the war is the tree. But as soon as I got home, there were 4 martyrs in our street, as though waiting for me to say goodbye to them. When I was done with that, 3 more martyrs from the same family in our street arrived. As soon as we buried them and returned, our neighbor's house, 2 houses down the street, was bombed by the army, and the house was wiped off the ground. Everyone died. I felt most sad for the little girls. I felt the war was targeting me alone, out of all of the people in Gaza. All day I've been seeing martyrs. In the Shifa hospital, I saw a sight that I will never forget. Hundreds of corpses, one on top of the other. Their flesh, their blood, and their bones all melting on each other. You wouldn't know the woman from the man or even the child. Piles of flesh on the beds and lots of people screaming and crying, not knowing where their kids are, their men or their women. That night I came home from hospital and was awake till morning from fear. I thought that it would only be that night I couldn't sleep, but till today I still see them in front of me and I still can't sleep.
Sorry. I didn't expect this. Sorry. I just grew up with a lot of people in my school from Palestine. Okay. So this is for her, so I'll get through it. Sajud Abu Hussein, 15, abroad, no news. What I love most about Gaza is people's kindness and simplicity. And what I hate most is the political party's fanaticism. Sometimes I feel that there's a contradiction between all of this love and kindness in people's hearts and the evil that controls the surface. If it was in my hands, I'd solve the problems of the Palestinian division tomorrow. In the war, they assassinated a big Hamas leader. All the media in the world covered the incident. But the whole world was in one valley, and we were in the other. Because Modi and Saluma, my younger brothers, and my dad, had gone to the land that's right next to the Hamas leader. We called them 1,000 times, and as usual, the Jawal mobile lines wouldn't go through, which stressed us out even more. My mom started pacing the balcony, like a small bird from whom they've taken her children. She imagined that the balcony would somehow rescue Modi and Saluma and Dad. And I was really stressed. I started crying and I went down to my aunt, and my aunt started soothing me. She lied to me and she told me that she had spoken to them. I knew that she hadn't talked to them. And she held me and she was crying and I was crying too. When I went up to our house, my mom was still pacing the balcony. I forgot to tell you that Modi and Saluma, my brothers, are 5 and 7 years old. They used to sleep in my arms and I felt that my soul was connected to them. When they didn't come home, I felt that my soul was going to escape my body and I would die. And honestly, it was only then that I felt that there was a war in Gaza. Because I was always busy, I was always on my computer all the time, and that was the day that I first lived the war. An hour later, there was a knock on the door, and my dad and Modi and Saluma came back. And as much as I loved them, that was the first time that I felt how dear they were to me and how much I couldn't bear to be parted from them. I put them on my lap and I kissed them as if I was kissing them for the first time. And Mum stopped pacing the balcony, and it was in that moment that I felt how much she loved my dad. After the war, I started thinking, why are we like this out of the whole world? They took our land, they threw us out of our homes, and because we are defending ourselves, all of this happens. There's no water, no electricity, no petrol, no phones. What are we to the world? Aren't we human?
Muhammad Qasim, born 1995, he wrote this when he was 15 years old. He is now an actor based in Morocco and lived on the Saftawi Street, where I went to school, actually, there. My grandmother and I were home alone. She was telling me stories about the days of our country, funny stories and sad ones. But she never told me a complete story because she always had to go to the bathroom halfway through. My grandma spends half of her time in the room and the other half in the bathroom. My parents came back at 10:30 at night and went to sleep straight away. I couldn't sleep. I was lying on my bed awake, writing my homework. Suddenly, I heard the noise of a distant explosion. I went to my parents' room and took the radio to hear the news. I woke my father up and told him I heard the sound of a strong explosion. He said, "Be quiet and go to bed. It's just aimless shooting." Anyway, I went back to bed and the electricity was out. Suddenly, there was a huge explosion that shook my world. I pulled my blanket and covered my face and something fell on me. I raised the blanket off me with all my strength, and it was the frame of the window that had fallen on me. The blanket was full of glass, and our entire house was full of black smoke. It was the day they hit the workers' union right next to our house. But that's not the point. The point is the stupid things that happened and which I can't find an explanation for. First, the world was on fire and we felt we would die, but my grandmother was looking for her false teeth. She was afraid that when she died, people would find out that she had no teeth, like they don't know already. Second, the house was full of smoke, but my father lit a cigarette and smoked, as if we needed more smoke. Third, my uncle called to make sure we were okay, and my father told him that we were all fine, thank God, but that all the windows of the house were broken except one. My uncle told him to break it, and my father did. And I don't know why I'm telling you this story. I know that we are living in a cage, a prison, like an encaged bird who wants to come out, but he's besieged. Kids are dying in front of their mother's eyes. Hearts are crying for them and screaming in the loudest voice, but no one hears. No one's heart softens, and no one seems to care. Thank you.
Reem Afana, aged 14, who lived on El Saftawi Street. We have no news about Reem. When I was young, I used to feel that I was the happiest child in the world. But the more I grow and my mind grows, the more my worry grows, because I start to understand things that I did not. I started to know the meaning of a deprived child. The thing that upsets me and makes me cry the most are children's tears. All children in the world, regardless of their nationality, religion, or color. When I grow up, I want to be a pediatrician, and that's the hope that gives me a big push in life, even though I'm fed up and bored and sad because Gaza doesn't have life anymore. Yesterday, I was sitting in school and I heard the sound of planes. I got really scared. I wanted to run away from school. I thought I was going to die because I remembered the war. The scenes of war won't leave my mind. On the third day of the war, my family was sitting together talking about what was happening in the war, and my grandmother was reassuring us so we wouldn't be scared. We were actually calmed, even though the sound of rockets didn't stop, but my grandmother's warm voice was calming us. Then the phone rang. The lines never caught in the war, so when we heard the sound of the phone, we were happy. Hello? Yes? This is the Israeli Defense Army. You have 5 minutes to clear the house. It's for your own benefit. We've warned you. I couldn't stand on my legs anymore. Everyone in the house started yelling. My grandmother was the first one to run away. It was the first time I'd seen her going so fast. My dad held me and my sisters and told us not to be scared. He was pulling me to leave, but I was going to die if I didn't take my teddy bear with me. I felt that I would betray him if I left him under the bombing. I escaped from my dad's hands and ran to my bear, took him in my arms, and then left. We all got far away from the house and sat down to wait for the 5 minutes. They were the longest 5 minutes in history. They became 10. We felt like they were years that passed. I was in a whirlwind. Thoughts and dreams were thrashing about in my head, and the world was spinning. I felt that the dream of being a doctor was very, very far away. I held the bear and remembered myself when I was small, how I was always laughing. I want to go back to being small and stay small. I don't want to grow up. But the only thing that comforted me was the love of people who didn't leave us for one moment. Gaza is full of love.
Ahab Elian, born in 1994, was 16 years old when he wrote this. He grew up on Al-Saftawi Street. He's now married and works as an actor living in Gaza. From when I first became aware of the world, I've had limited thinking. Life for me was to be born, grow up, get married, have kids, work, raise them, feed them, educate them, marry them off, and then die. But after the war, I found that life is much harder than that. It turned out that every step we take has a million knots behind it. I'm scared of not finding work when I grow up, because wherever I go, I see men sitting in front of their houses with nothing to do. It's what scares and saddens me the most. That's why kids in Gaza took responsibility and were denied their childhood since birth. My mother always used to say, Ahab is the best one of my kids, because I was always at home, never had any problems. When the war started, my father locked us up at home because of how scared he was for us. 2 hours later, I was bored. I went out to walk around our house, but this time the walk was different. I was afraid to walk near the cars in case they were bombed. and all the time I kept looking up at the sky in case a plane would come and bomb me without me knowing. I was terrified, even though the Saftawi district didn't see a lot of activity. I went back home running, as though from something terrifying, and stayed at home till the war was over. After the war, my life changed a lot. My relationship with people and the neighbors improved. I became known to the men of the neighborhood and started playing checkers with the old people. I started spending time, all my time, outside the house, can't stay inside for a minute, and my mother stopped saying Ahab is the best one of my kids. I discovered that I didn't exist before the war, but after the war, here I am, God protect me, in the city, breathing its air, singing, dancing and crying with it, and life is rolling onwards.
Mahmoud Najim, who was 16 when this was written. The information that we have is that he remains in Gaza, works in computer design, is married, but there is no news that is recent. For the first time, the streets of Gaza were clean. There wasn't a paper or a cardboard. People were collecting the paper from the streets to use it for baking because the electricity was disconnected. And my mum didn't want to bake, and she asked me to bring bread from the oven. The queue at the oven, the bakers, stretched from Gaza to the West Bank. People would line up for 8 hours to get their turn and take half a pack of bread. In seconds, a Palestinian rocket launcher was erected in the area, and in less than 1 second, the Israeli planes started bombing it. People began running in all directions, and the ambulances came. People started falling dead. Others were injured. I was in shock, and people in the street started telling me, well, thank God you're safe. Anyway, I went back home without the loaf of bread, and my mum yelled at me, but till today, she doesn't know why I didn't bring the bread.
Amjad Abu Yassin was born in 1993. He was 17 years old when he wrote this. He's from Ash-Shati camp. He's still in Gaza. He's married. He works as an actor, and he's lost his home. A day before the war, Gaza for me was joy and happiness, trips and going to the sea. Life seemed to be happy, and I wasn't thinking about anything. I had one dream, that Gaza would develop in art and sport. I felt that everything was fine except for those two things. But it turned out nothing was fine. No art, no sport, health, or safety. It's all the same. Gaza stopped being the city of my dreams because my dream is to be an actor. Am I going to be an actor for 20 people in Gaza and wait till the border opens? If it was in my hands, I would try as much as possible to reduce wars, death, and violence. It's a shame for every drop of blood that falls on the ground. I hate the silence and the abnormal tolerance that people have. I wish all Gaza would wake up tomorrow and walk the streets shouting loudly, "Enough!" When the war started, we were playing football, and the atmosphere was strange. The sky was red. Suddenly we heard the sound of a plane. Never heard a sound like that. We were all scared and lay on the ground waiting for death. After that, we heard the sound of a loud explosion meters away from us. We started looking in each other's faces and silently saying goodbye. Turned out the bombing wasn't meant for us. It was targeting a car of wanted men on the road above. But we kept lying down, waiting for the second rocket. And all I could think of was my two older brothers who were with me. I was more afraid for them than for myself, and I think they also felt the same way. I carried my sports shorts and ran away from the field. As I ran, I stepped on a piece of shrapnel. I took it out of my leg and went out onto the street and saw them. They were 3 martyrs, and you couldn't make out their features. The first one's legs were on fire. He was looking at me, and I at him. Among everyone there, he was warning me about something I didn't understand. It was then I knew he was warning me about a car coming fast towards us. Then I knew the real meaning of death, and that instead of being 3 martyrs, they could have been 4. I was shocked at the scene. I stood there watching, and when I woke up after passing out, I ran home. The war came and went, and we're still living it. The victims are always the poor people who have nothing to do with anything. Even when there's an earthquake or flood in any country, the victims are the poor people, as though there's a universal conspiracy against them. After the war, everyone started lying to everyone else. Lies, cheating, dishonesty, deceitfulness. For positions and interests. The leaders and the powerful people commit slaughters and crimes without batting an eyelid or feeling any guilt. Poor people get poorer, and sick ones sicker. I've lost trust in all mottos. The biggest speech from the biggest leader is bullshit. All speeches in the world don't warm up a cold person or someone sleeping in a tent after the war. The crisis is that the whole world is watching us as though there's nothing going on, and they're still making speeches.
So this is by Taima Okasha, who was 13 when she wrote it, and she was born in 1997 at Tufa. Macaroni, mujadara, noodles in cans of all shapes and colours, made in Morocco, China, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Somalia, and the date of expiry doesn't matter. In the war, all the streets were filled with empty cans. A lot of kids wounded their legs on the empty cans. The occupation was leading a war on us in the earth and sky, and we had declared a vicious war on food. We used to eat 100 times a day. Whenever we opened our eyes from 6 in the morning till the next day, 6 in the morning, we'd be eating. I thought only our house was like that. But when I asked, they told me all of Gaza went crazy for food. I thought the state of war and the scenes of martyrs and destruction would affect people's appetite for food. But it seemed the state of fear and horror and worry makes people more hungry and they eat more. It could also be that the whole family was at our place, especially the girls. They competed on who could make tastier food. My poor father couldn't keep up, carrying bags of food of all shapes and colours. The food we ate in 20 days of war was enough for a year. And the problem was, every time I said I don't want to eat, I eat more. When I grow up, I want to be a journalist, or a lawyer, or a prime minister. Journalist, so I could photograph the beauty and simplicity in Gaza because I love it. I love its salt and its sand and air, and I can't imagine living anywhere else. A lawyer, so I could defend all the deprived and mistreated people in this city because I don't like seeing anyone suffer in it. And I wish I could be the Prime Minister so I could force law and order on the city because that's where the solution begins.
Ruwan Jaror, born 1997, on El Daraj. She was 13 when she wrote this, and she's now married in Sweden, and she owns a cafe. Relax, girls. Don't be scared. This is just the sound of aimless shooting. That's what our teacher said as soon as the bombing started. After a while, her phone rang, and she spoke only a few words. 120 martyrs. She smashed her mobile phone onto the floor and she told us, go home, all of you. As soon as we went out into the yard, we saw our parents. Some of them in pajamas, some in their undershirts, and some barefoot. We were very scared. My two sisters and I kept waiting for Dad, but he was really late. So we decided to go home by ourselves, even though it's a long way. On the way, I saw something for the very first time. A martyr being carried in a coffin, wrapped in the flag of Palestine, with banners around him and people crying. But the weird thing is that the funeral barely had 30 people in it. Funerals of martyrs usually have thousands. Then I felt that there really is some big catastrophe going on in the country. I got scared for my dad, because I didn't want him to come get us because I was scared he'd be hit by a rocket. I was also scared of dying. I don't want to die now, because it would be such a big catastrophe if I died and no one came to my funeral. I started running home, and people were running around us like it was doomsday. No one knew where they were going because of the sounds of the rockets. Every time the rockets hit the ground would shake. I felt that these streets were not the same streets anymore, and these people were not the same people anymore. Strange sights, strange sounds. The people are now different. After the war, a lot of things changed inside of me. Like I started hating going to the bathroom. From the second I go in, I can't wait to come running out again. Because all the time during the war, I was afraid that they'd hit a rocket in our house while I was in the bathroom. And in there, I would be in great focus, so you know the rest. I also started hating the morning line at school. When the war started, I was in a line, and that's why today I feel that the minutes in the line are hours of fear and worry. All school for me is one pile, and the line is another. I also have these terrifying dreams. All night I have a conflict inside of me between the desire to sleep and the fear of the nightmares that will come. Sleep became like a terrifying monster that's hiding behind my eyelids, waiting to come out. I stay like that till the morning. I don't know when I've slept and when I've woken up. When I grow up, I want to become an actress. And this is a hard dream to fulfill in Gaza, especially for girls. But I tell myself, it's a shame for the people in Gaza to be deprived of my talent because I could be a very important actress. But if they don't want me, to hell with them. I'll go to another country and I'll act a lot there. Gazans are deprived of everything anyway. It doesn't stop at theatre. Sometimes I think people in Gaza can barely find food. How are they going to have the time to go to the theatre? You know, I wish I could live in a civil, democratic society with peace. And 20 cinemas. And keep watching movies, and I would fly all day in my imagination and keep dreaming.
Yasmin Abu Amr, born 1996, 14 years old, Al-Shuja'iyya. We have no news from Yasmin. I want to be a specialist in the science of metaphysics, what's behind nature. You know why? Because I think that Gaza itself is behind nature. And I got so much from my presence here in Gaza that I'd like to transfer my skill to others. The Shuja'iyya camp is always the center of events. Each time the occupation wants to invade Gaza, they pass by our house. When the war began, people left their houses thinking that the Shuja'iyya would be hit. It's normal in this case to leave our house. Everyone was calling my dad to convince him to leave the house. My brothers in Algeria, my uncles in the States, my uncles from Ankara, the whole world was begging my dad and he wouldn't budge, refusing to leave the Shuja'iyya. 3 days with my mum having packed the house stuff and we're in suspended travel mode. We want to go to my sister's house because it's safer there. After we were all exhausted from talking, he agreed and he said, "You go and I'll follow." How can we go and leave him? My mum was smart. She left the bread at home, and you know how dear bread was in the war. As soon as we got to my sister's house, she called him and said, "Salman, we forgot the bread. Can you bring it, please?" And Salman fell to the trap and brought the bread, and we wouldn't let him leave. The next morning, we woke up to a phosphorus bomb that fumed the street. We all started crying and our tears falling because of the phosphorus. The bomb was easier on us than Dad's taunting. He said, "I told you, let's stay home. It's better for us. There's no place like home." And on it went. What added fuel to the fire is that the mosque and house next to my sister's house were destroyed in the bombing. And you can imagine what Dad did to us. He wanted to take us back to the house immediately. No sooner had he finished his words than we were told that the house next to ours in Shuja'iyya was bombed and the front of our house was ripped off. Then, for the first time, we all looked at Dad. We stayed at my sister's place. It became clear to us that wherever we were in Gaza, in the war, we were not safe. After the war, I started to always dress in a very clean and tidy way, so that if I die a nice death. But it would be the biggest problem if I was hit by a rocket because I'd become 100 pieces, and I'd like to die in one piece. Wow. Gaza and Gaza's dreams. Our dream has become to die a good death, not to live a good life.
Ashraf A. Sosi was 16 years old when he wrote this. He was from ASHTAR Street. He's still in Gaza, but we have no recent news of him. All the neighborhood kids loved him. He was calmer than a breeze. He would take his pocket money from my father and give it to me. Everyone loved him. His friends came by and he went with them to school. They went out running like butterflies, flying off the ground like the world was created for them. The Israeli planes were in the air. The sound of the helicopter was like a monster waiting to pounce on its prey. A car of wanted men was driving along Yarmouk Street, and the butterflies were near the car. The butterflies didn't know that this car would be the fire that would burn them. A rocket fell on the car. My brother Tarek flew 5 meters off the ground. He flew higher than the car, then came down walking. Nothing was the matter with him. The ambulance came and took the corpses. People told him to get into the ambulance. He told them, nothing's the matter with me. He kept going to school. 100 meters later, he put his hand on his heart and fell down a martyr. I was in the street waiting for the school bus, and my sister told me to go and see what's going on. I did, but I didn't see Tarek. I went to school. While I was in my class, my uncle came and told me, "You will take 3 days off school." I didn't suspect anything. We got in the car. My uncle told the driver to turn off the news. Then I started getting suspicious because my uncle loves the news. We got home and there was a big crowd of people around. Before I went down, I saw my father sitting on the chair crying. It was the first time I'd seen my father cry. He was holding the picture of my brother Tarek. I said to him, "Dad, was my brother martyred?" He said, "God have mercy on his soul." The ambulance brought him from the hospital. We all ran to him to say goodbye. He was sleeping like an angel, with the book that he'd been carrying still in his hands. My father refused to let us go with him to the cemetery, but I got in the car and went and said goodbye to him and read the Fatiha prayer on his grave. I kept going for 3 months every day to sit at his grave and talk to him. At night, I stare at his picture in the room with the hero martyr Tarek written on it. Since my brother was martyred, I've got used to sleeping in the bed alone. We used to sleep one on top of the other, legs on top of heads. Sometimes it felt like all our limbs were jumbled together. But today, I have a bed by myself. I'll never forget my brother.
Ali al-Hassani. He was 15 when this was written and grew up on Al-Saftawi Street and is currently in Poland doing his PhD. The thing I love most about Gaza? Why, it's that it's not like any other countries. Other countries have lots of problems. Famine, siege, division, occupation, bombing, destruction, and death, but we have none of these issues. That's why I love Gaza a lot. Especially that the sewage and the streets are clean, people love one another, prices are cheap, everyone's happy. And the fish are healthy and they don't swim in sewage. And that I will definitely not die of hunger, poverty, or a heart attack that half my relatives have died from, because there's so much happiness. I want to tell you a big secret that I'm holding in my chest and hesitating to say since I started speaking. The secret is, my dear folks, I am the reason for the war on Gaza. You might be surprised as to why, because I never had a dream that didn't come true. One night, before the war, I dreamed that the war started and our house was bombed, and I was the only survivor. And the next day, at 11:25, the airstrikes began on Gaza. The first shock I got in the war was when the strongest teacher in school, the math teacher, hid under his desk in fear from the first second. And I thought, if the strongest teacher hides under the desk, what do we do? A lot of kids peed themselves. I started screaming, and everyone started screaming with me. I was screaming for our house that I was sure was destroyed, and for my family that I was sure was martyred. I went out, running in the street, wanting to rush home to my family. But I waited for 2 hours for a car to take me. And in the end, I went home walking. All the way, I was imagining our house destroyed and my family dead. I got home and found nothing was the matter. And my family were taking down the windows so they wouldn't break from the air pressure. But till today, I'm scared they will bomb our house. That's why, and you can ask my mum, I sleep with 3 mattresses under me, so that when there's bombing, the mattresses will absorb the hits and nothing will happen to me. I hate dreaming. But dreams are not in our control. I think that Ali, that's me, before the war is different from Ali after the war, who's a new person that I'm trying to discover. Before the war, I didn't understand anything about politics. I didn't know the head of state from the prime minister. I never listened to news, but today, I became a political analyst. Al Jazeera this morning, midday this evening, harvest of the day, harvest of the week. I started following all these programs and discussing them. I started feeling that politics and news are very important in our life because they're what kill us and what gives us life. And also because I want to be the first to know if there's going to be another war.
This next one is by Tamer Najm, who wrote this when he was 17. Tamer is in Gaza at the moment, and he has moved south. And he lived in Sheikh Radwan. Just want to say that this is actually going to be quite a hard piece for me to read because it's all about news and getting news, and one of the hardest things this war in Gaza for me and for my family over there is not to get news. So actually I wish we could go back to what Tamer says in here. Gaza is a matchbox, and we are the matches inside it. When the war started on Gaza, all the media was focused on us. Al Jazeera, Al Arabiya, and all the satellite channels were focused on Gaza, and the occupation wouldn't leave us alone. The whole world became busy with Gaza and what is happening in it. Suddenly, Al Jazeera wrote, "Breaking news, death of Muhammad al-Hindi." And it wasn't normal because that Muhammad, he's my uncle, my mother's brother. It was the first time I see the screaming move from the live broadcast on TV to the house. Screaming and yelling and tears, all of it mixed up together, and it moved from our house to the street, and my mum fainted. A while later, the phone rang. It was my second uncle calling to tell us that Muhammad was martyred. He didn't know that the whole world knew the news. This television is awful. Before a person is shot, as the bullet is on its way to his chest, the television has already broadcast the news. But these days, all the channels are sitting idle, praying to God to send another war on Gaza so they can have work. Anyway, we all started crying bitterly for my uncle and remembering him and talking about him. We kept talking about him for a long time. Then it started getting less because death became normal in Gaza. After the war, I stopped caring whether I live or die. After what we saw in the war, I don't care about anything, because I think each day I live is the biggest bonus. And all the life I live after the war is extra because I could have died at any second. You know, I'm sick of the city, even though I love it. I am sick of the people too. Sometimes I feel that I know the 1.5 million who are in Gaza. There's nothing new. The same day is repeated every day. I feel like traveling, like changing scene and faces. As soon as I wake up every morning, I see the electricity pole in my face. I wish I would wake up one day and not find it there. Each day, Abu Ibrahim stands at the door of the supermarket, and Abed, the bean seller, is selling his beans, and Abu al-Abed is sitting at the door of his house, afraid that his house would run away. Ibrahim is standing with Hassan. I know the taxi drivers one by one. I know who takes you to the city and who goes to the beach. It's soul draining. The only hour that is different in my life is when I come to the theater practice. It became my work and mission. I wait for it impatiently. Without the theater, I would have gone crazy. When I grow up, I want to be a big actor. I've loved acting since I was a kid. But any institution that I used to go to when I was a kid threw me out a few days later. But this time is different. Thank you.
Amani Asharafa, who was 18 when she wrote this, and she lived in El Ramal. She's now in Turkey, working as a journalist. Gaza is a plane carrying people and traveling towards the unknown, landing neither in heaven nor in hell. No one knows when it will land. And people may stay suspended like that for twice my lifetime. All days here are the same. There's nothing new. The simplest thing is that dreams and wishes are hard to make true in Gaza, especially if they're like mine, to be an artist and singing and acting, playing music. In Gaza, the only music is that of death. Dancing on wounds. If I go abroad and study directing, how would society look at me? After I graduate, would the country be like now? Or worse? Everything for me is foggy and unclear, like people's faces on Friday at the Ferris market. And like the day the war began. The first hit was at the Ministry of Passports. My friend and I came out of an exam. It was the first day of the first term exams. We sat in front of the school gate talking and waiting for the rest of our friends so we'd go home together. And suddenly, there was a series of explosions. I was in shock and I felt that I was going to die. We ran away and I was really scared. I saw the women running and screaming and beating their faces, and I had no idea what was going on. I felt I couldn't stand on my legs. And then the world started spinning. I fainted and stopped feeling anything. And then I woke up to my friend's voice shouting, "Amani, for God's sake, wake up!" When I woke up, I started crying, not knowing where to go or what to do. An older girl helped me, and she took me home. As soon as I arrived, my mother took me in her arms. I was very tired, but at that moment, I rested. I needed to fall into someone's arms. The hardest thing to feel is that your moment of death is near. The war was a black ghost that covered Gaza's day and night. It imposed its hell on people and on the earth and sky and air that we breathe. After the war, I had a breakdown. a big, wild wave overtook my soul. I was thinking I wouldn't be able to come out from under it, but it was like a hand was extended to me through the theatre, a rubber ring that pulled me out from under the wave. And today, I feel a comfort that I haven't felt in a long time. And I hope I can always stay like this.
Ana-Sofia Velasco, born in 1995, from Sheikh Radwan. He's now in Morocco and works as an actor. Since I was a small kid, I have dreamt of being a famous footballer. I believed I would fulfill my dreams, but today there are a million obstacles in my path. Before, there was no playing fields for adults or even kids. Then the siege came and made everything worse. If I was a prime minister, I would pay most attention to the Ministry of Youth and Sport. I would build playing fields everywhere, especially in schools. And I would let students play freely, not to be kicked out by the school guards. I would abolish all clubs' fees and preserve all parks. But dreams, security, hope, and the future are all words that lose their meaning in a city that kills the smallest dream possible. I was a goalkeeper. And my friend Mahmoud kept telling me, I'm going to get a goal. But I always stopped him. On the 7th of January, 2009, a day in the war, I was sitting at the door of my house and it was foggy. And someone came to tell me, your friend Mahmoud was martyred. I didn't believe it. I went looking for my friend and I was really scared of the idea of death. I got to the mosque and I saw the closest friend in my life, Mahmoud, wrapped in the flag of Palestine and torn into pieces. I cried a lot. And I was sad because I couldn't hug him or kiss him. I started holding him. We took him to the cemetery and buried him, and I kept sitting there, telling him how much I loved him. And I was really upset because he left me alone in this world. Alone. As I was leaving the cemetery, there was heavy bombing. I felt that the angel of death was following me and not leaving me alone. But thank God, I'm still alive. Thank you.
Friends, thank you. These were written by kids, some of whom we don't have news of, some of whom we do. But they were written having worked with ASHTAR who are this company, this theatre company that work and have worked for decades now in Palestine, specifically with children and young people. Thanks to you, we have just raised over £500 for them, which will go straight to them and straight to the work that they are continuously doing, working with the kids, and they're combining their work with Palestinian psychologists to try and help them, as they put it, alleviate the trauma. Anything else that you can possibly donate in these dire times, please do. The links are there. But I think what comes through incredibly clearly through those monologues is the role of theatre in their lives, and that hand that reached out for a lot of them, and in its own small but significant way, that has also been our role today, using art as a tool of hope in clearly very dark times. So thank you all. I'm going to thank, astonishingly, all of this has happened in 2.5 weeks. I'm going to thank everybody. So the Reverend Dr. Simon, who opened this, I sent him a message. I didn't know him. I'd been to a wedding here and felt the vibe might be a good one. And he texted me back going, I'm just on my way back from the march. And the answer is yes, and I'll tell you more later. You know, and he's opened his church and opened his arms. Equally, Abby, Paul, everybody else at the church, thank you. We didn't meet before today, and the embrace has been full. Our filmmakers also totally unknown to ourselves, and so Jackie, Micaela, Nick, Bradley, thank you. Our team of volunteers, Dana, Madeline, Noah, Josh, the amazing producers, Rachel and Ana-Sofia, who have just been an absolute force behind this. Thank you. And our readers, Sam, Ahmed, Dina, Juliet, Alex, Lauren, Osama, Khalid, Seyan, and our musician, Ivan. Thank you. There are 2,000 events happening today. Some of them are in London. The hashtag is #Gaza Monologues. If you want to know anything more about anything, follow that. Follow ASHTAR and everything that they're talking about. And finally, to the writers of those monologues, to Iman, to ASHTAR Theatre, to the people of Palestine going through this hell, I just want to say that we see you and we are here with you. Thank you.